Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters pod. And alright guys, we are here. It is episode 55. This is our end of year / beginning of year podcast episode because we are going to be taking a look back here on 2024. I'm going to be giving you 3 segments here. We're going to first be talking about my top 10 favorite movies of 2024, and then we're going to look ahead to 2025 and talk about my predictions for the top 10 box office films for 2025 and my top 10 most anticipated films of 2025. So guys, this is going to be the holiday episode. I talked about this a little bit in the last episode of the Access Blockbusters pod at the beginning, episode 54. And long story short, we're putting this episode out here at this time and not doing our usual Creature Commandos, Skeleton Crew, Dune Prophecy kind of episode because of the Access Blockbusters pod, because I am away and I am traveling. And so still always wanted to give you guys something and, during the holidays in case you're just hanging around, bored, want to listen to something. And this is always here. I think it's going to be fun. And always committed to trying to get you guys a clip or a podcast episode out every single day on the Access Blockbusters channel. So here we are. And so speaking of the Access Blockbusters channel, if you haven't subscribed, then please make sure to do so. Give this video a like. It would mean a lot to me. And let me know what you think about any of these topics in the comments down below. We are going to be getting back to our regularly scheduled programming, quote unquote, in the next episode. And we're going to have a lot to talk about. We're going to have, wrap up Dune Prophecy. We're going to talk about a couple episodes of Creature Commandos and Skeleton Crew. I'm going to try to get through Squid Game by the time the next episode comes out. And we'll talk about Squid Game Season 2 if we can. A couple other things here and there. But guys, it's going to be exciting. And so I can't wait. But as of the recording this, I'm recording this in advance of 2025. But this is going to come out right around then. So I hope you guys had a wonderful Christmas holiday or holiday season. And I hope that if this is 2025, that you guys are having an amazing start to the new year. I'm excited about 2025. I think that there's going to be a lot of fun stuff coming out for us to talk about. So yeah, guys, that is it for the intro. And let's just dive in, shall we? Let's get into our look back and look forward episode of the Access Blockbusters pod. Alrighty, guys, it is time to wrap up 2024. What a year it has been. What a year it has been. We are here today to talk about our top films of 2024 and look ahead to 2025, but we'll get there in just a little bit. But this segment today in this podcast episode is going to be my ranking of my top 10 favorite movies of 2024. The 10 films that came out this year that my top 10. And so to be honest, right, to be quite frank with you, I haven't seen every single movie that came out this year. And in fact, I'm sure that January and February, when the movie theater movies are a little bit slower, is going to be my time to catch up on all those Oscar kind of movies that are coming out, because I'd love to do an Oscar preview kind of episode in late January or early February. So hopefully, going to be able to catch up on those. I do have a couple films on here on my list, hint, hint, wink, wink, that I haven't, talked about too much, or at least one film I haven't talked about too much, that I think a couple of these films on this list are going to be Oscar contenders. So hopefully some other films, to catch up on in January. So again, it's not, necessarily a complete list, but it is my list of films that I have seen in 2024, and the top 10 are here. And so, yeah, again, I also talked about the fact that, at least that I also just don't go and see every movie, because sometimes the Kraven the Hunter and Madam Web come out in the same year, and you're like, well, yeah, I could spend, 3 hours of my time, and not including commuting and whatnot, to watch these movies, but is it worth it? I don't know. Maybe if and when this is my full-time job, if that ever happens, then sure, I'll go watch Madam Web and Kraven the Hunter. But for now, decided not to watch those movies. So, I mean, obviously, they would not have made my top 10 best movies of 2024. But just as a disclaimer, if your favorite movie of the year is not on this list, it probably just means I didn't get around to seeing it. And that is all. So, guys, let's get into this. Without further ado, top 10 movies of 2024. Here we go. Again, this is just my personal list. If you disagree, totally fine. I've talked ad nauseum on this channel about how our opinions are different, and that's just because we come to these movies with different expectations and experiences, and that is the best part. So make sure to comment down below with your list, your top 10 favorite movies of 2024. I'd love to hear them. And without further ado, I said that before, let's get into it. Number 10, coming in at number 10 is Moana 2. Look, Moana 2, I thought about it, right? Is not a bad movie, in my opinion. I think it's good. I think that you compare it to Moana 1, which even then, I still am one of those people who didn't love Moana 1. I really liked it, but didn't love it. And I think this movie is just kind of a notch down. It's good. I think that I talked about this in my review recently. I think the music is lacking, and I think that there are some story arcs and story elements that are just a bit empty. Like Maui's story in this film just felt very off to me. But it's a fine movie, and I think it has some good adventure moments. It has some good lessons. I think some of the music is pretty okay, pretty good. The Beyond song, the main song, kind of the How Far I'll Go equivalent. I think it's good. I just I think people might have been disappointed in the fact that it wasn't as good as Moana 1, but hey, I think Moana 2 is a pretty good movie, pretty solid movie. Coming in at number 9 is Transformers 1. Guys, I really enjoyed Transformers 1. I thought it was, for somebody who hasn't seen any Transformers movie other than Bumblebee, so I haven't seen any Transformers movie with the word Transformers in it. I know generally the lore behind Optimus Prime and Megatron, but not really. And so being able to see a movie like this, on top of the fact that it was animated, and not to say animated films are bad, obviously. I love animated movies. I just had Moana 2 on this list. And, I'm sure you could guess there are a couple more animated films on my list above Transformers 1. But, not to say animation is bad, just the fact that I wasn't sure if I was going to dig the style or anything like that. And then on top of the fact that you have some really interesting choices here for voice actors. Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Brian Tyree Henry. And so, what's his name? Keegan-Michael Key as well. And so I thought, is this going to be a movie for me? I sat down, I watched it, I really enjoyed it. I thought that there was some great character development going on here. And as somebody who hasn't seen Transformers, it was a great introduction into this world, and I thought it was a really good time. So Transformers 1 coming in at number 9. 2 animated films to start out this list. There are going to be a couple more, like I said. Coming in at number 8, though, is not an animated film. It is Gladiator 2. I am somebody who thinks the first Gladiator is very entertaining, very, very entertaining. And I thought this movie was very entertaining. Now, I've seen the criticisms for Gladiator 2. It's basically the same movie as the first one. There were some odd plot holes and whatnot. Honestly, maybe it's just my expectations that, I wasn't expecting this to be the next greatest movie of all time. And yes, I talked about this in my review. You can go check it out. All 3 of these movies have reviews. In fact, almost all of the movies on this list, I would say 6 or 7 out of the 10 films on this list have reviews on the channel for them. Gladiator 2 being one of them. I talk about the fact that, yeah, I was worried, especially towards the beginning. It felt very similar to the first Gladiator, but I think they do some interesting things here with Paul Mescal's character towards the end that I was like, oh, quite interesting. I really like Denzel Washington. I know a couple of critics that I watch don't like Denzel Washington in this movie. I really liked him. I thought he did a great job, and he really chewed up the scenery, but again, that's just me. So Gladiator 2, really, really fun time, coming in at number 8. Coming in at number 7 is the only MCU movie to come out in 2024, and that is Deadpool and Wolverine. Is this movie, the kind of cinema that Martin Scorsese is looking for in comic book movies? No. I mean, if Martin Scorsese watched this movie, he would be giddy because he would come out of it going like, this is what I'm talking about. This is why comic book movies aren't cinema, whatever. I don't care. It's so fun. It's such a fun movie. And it has some moments of emotion. I think it's not one of those movies where it kind of gets you like the Spider-Man No Way Homes, where it's a really fun movie until, Aunt May dies and you're like, oh, the feels, right? You feel it. Deadpool and Wolverine, I don't think is like that. Even the scene where Logan, has that moment in his head where Cassandra Nova is, it's like, yeah, I mean, Hugh Jackman's acting really well. Even the scene with him and Laura, really good. But I think that's more built on the fact that for people who watch Logan, you understand the gravitas and the gravity of that situation. So again, it's just such an entertaining film. From the bye moments, all the jokes about the MCU, the TVA at the beginning, the Happy Hogan scene, obviously all the not Avengers cameos, but the other MCU or Marvel characters cameos with Laura and Elektra, Blade, Channing Tatum's Gambit. It's fun. It's so fun. And just to see Hugh Jackman again playing a different Wolverine, but still Hugh Jackman, I loved it. It's so fun. So Deadpool and Wolverine coming in at number 7. Coming in at number 6 is a movie that came out a while ago. I might not even have talked about it at all on the channel, but it is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I think, is a movie that if it came out later on in the year with most of these other films that are on this list, it would have been, it would have popped, because I think that it came out in May, and I just don't think people talked about it that much. But I really enjoyed this movie. I thought that the characterizations of Noah and the world that they built after Caesar, so interesting. Proximus Caesar was that his name? So interesting to see how legacy can be distorted. And I think that the story overall was super strong. CGI is incredible. It's amazing. And I really want to see this movie again at some point because I had just recently watched all the Planet of the Apes movies, the James Franco one and the Woody Harrelson ones and all that kind of stuff. And I thought I should have just said Andy Serkis. Why didn't I just say Andy Serkis ones? The Andy Serkis Planet of the Apes movies. But anyways, I had recently seen them and then watched Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and I was just so amazed at how they were able to take this franchise in a new direction while also keeping to the spirit of those movies that came before. So I was so thoroughly surprised and entertained with this movie. And I think it had a lot to say, honestly, under the surface as well. It's not, I think, as we move up this list, it's not just about entertainment anymore for me. And it's more about, there's a lot of profound messages and themes and things to think about, commentary is what I should say, that goes on in these movies. So number 6, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Coming in at number 5, speaking of profound, is Conclave. Conclave is a movie that I didn't talk about on this channel because, frankly, I didn't think people would be that interested in it, but it's coming in on my top 10 of 2024, and it will probably be one of those Oscar movies that, gets talked about a lot later, and hopefully I'll be able to catch the other ones as well. But Conclave, super fascinating movie. So it's basically, for those of you who don't know, it's about the papal election, right? This isn't a spoiler, it's the premise. It happens in the first 5 minutes, but the Pope dies, and then they have to basically elect a new Pope. And it's like political espionage and backstabbing and vote getting and politics and intrigue and twists and turns and lots of really interesting things to say about people and religion and humanity and politics, and such an interesting movie. I think at the very end as well, there's a couple neat little twists that I just wasn't expecting. I knew it was based on a book, or at least I found out after the fact, and I might even want to read the book now because it's just such a thought-provoking movie. Ralph Fiennes gives a great performance. Other actors in there like Stanley Tucci as well. Such a thought-provoking movie. It's not a heartwarming movie necessarily, but it's not one that you go, I feel icky after that. No, it's a movie that just makes you think, and it has a lot of really interesting things to ponder in there. So number 5 is Conclave. Coming in at number 4, The Wild Robot. This movie, I had heard such good things about going before, and I didn't love the trailers, so I was a little bit iffy on if I was going to see it, but everyone just had such rave reviews for this movie, and I went and saw it, and yeah, there are moments where I almost cried. It's such an emotional movie, and yet surprisingly simple, and at its core, just a movie about parenthood and a movie about letting go of your children when it's time. And it's such an odd thing to say about an animated movie about a robot, an AI system, but I think it just had so much to say while also being so heartwarming, so warm and joyful and entertaining. And I felt all the feels in this movie. It was so surprising how good this movie was, and I was floored. And so if you haven't seen The Wild Robot yet, I've also reviewed this on the channel. I've reviewed so far Wild Robot, Deadpool and Wolverine, Gladiator 2, Transformers 1, and Moana 2. If you want to check out any of my thoughts there, just make sure to look it up on the channel and they'll be there. But Wild Robot was a movie that I recommended at the time to seeing, for everyone to see, and I totally recommend everyone to see it if you haven't yet. So The Wild Robot coming in at number 4. Another animated film, by the way. That's the third one out of the last 7, which is interesting. Coming in at number 3 is not an animated film. It is Dune Part 2. Now, I was adamant before Dune Part 2 came out that, people were like, Dune Part 1 is, it's really good. And I agree. Dune Part 1 is really good. But Dune Part 1, in my eyes, is not a complete movie. Dune Part 2, I also don't necessarily think is a complete movie, but it is one of the best second parts of a 6-hour movie that I've ever seen, which it makes it seem like I'm just kidding around and I'm making fun of the movie. No, I mean that. It's like one of the best second halves of a story I've seen. Some of you might disagree and say, you think it's a complete movie. Totally fine. Because I rewatched Dune Part 1 right before Dune Part 2. Literally the night before Dune Part 2 came out, I rewatched Dune Part 1. And I watched Dune Part 2 and I was like, it's one movie. It's a 6-hour movie. But just the technical mastery in this movie, the VFX, the sound effects, the character work, the drama, the fight scenes. Oh my goodness, the fight scenes on Gate Prime with the Harkonnens, and on Arrakis with the Emperor or with Feyd-Rautha, and just the fight scenes are so good that the acting from Timothée Chalamet as he becomes the leader, the Lisan al-Gaib, with the Fremen, it's so powerful. And again, I think the one thing just kind of preventing it from being at the very top is that it's not an emotional kind of movie, and for me, emotion's kind of important. I don't need to cry in my favorite movies, but I just want to feel a wide range of emotions. But this film was intense. It was intense. And I think that in itself is worth something. And I think, again, the other thing is just that I feel like it's not really its own standalone project. It just kind of felt like a part 2, which again, for what it is, it's awesome. So Dune Part 2 coming in at number 3. Speaking of Part 2s though, coming in at number 2 is Wicked Part 1. Now, this is a case where I think the Part 1, yeah, it's a Part 1. Sure, it ends at the intermission point of the Broadway musical. But this film felt complete. And the music is incredible. Cynthia Erivo is incredible. Ariana Grande is incredible. I just recently reviewed the film, so you can go check out my review for Wicked Part 1. But the story is fantastic. There's a lot of things to say here about, being different and being marginalized in society and expecting things, expecting people to save you or people to lift you up, and then realizing that they're not as altruistic as you think they are. The story is so incredible, and just the music is fantastic. This is a movie that I just, as soon as it ended, especially the last 15 minutes or so with Defying Gravity, I was in my chair, I was sweating because of how, tense I was and how engaged I was. But at the end of it, when it said to be continued, I was like, give me Part 2 right now. And if that doesn't say it all, I don't know what will. So Wicked Part 1 coming in at number 2. And finally, coming in at number 1, keeping with the theme here of animated movies on this top 10 list, is Inside Out 2. I know I said a couple weeks ago in the Wicked Part 1 review that I think Wicked Part 1 was my favorite movie of 2024, and I genuinely meant that at the time, but I wasn't really, I didn't have time to sit down and make a list, and I totally forgot somehow that Inside Out 2 came out this year. And it's close, by the way. Inside Out 2 and Wicked Part 1, it's almost like 1A and 1B. I love both of those movies so much, but Inside Out 2, look, Inside Out 1 is my favorite movie of all time, I think. And I went into Inside Out 2 saying, did we need this movie? I don't know. I came out of the movie saying, yes, I think we needed this movie because it had something completely different to say. And then the second question was this movie even going to be better than the original or even match it? And no, but it got about as close as I think you ever could. I think it's different, right? It's almost like it's not even fair to compare the two, because the first one is about, emotions and feelings on a level where you're a kid, right? You're leaving home for the first time, you're feeling sadness. And this movie is about, you're growing up now, you're a teenager, you're feeling anxiety for the first time. And that's so palpable and powerful. And I love that. And I think at this point, you've sold me Inside Out 3. Make it, because I think you can make a movie where Riley goes to college or something like that. And you can deal with even more emotions about letting go of, home. Speaking of the wild robot, right? Letting go of home and parents. And this movie is amazing. It's amazing how they're able to do this. Pixar is so back on a hot streak, and I can't wait to see what they do from here. Please make Inside Out 3. I'm on board with that now. So Inside Out 2 is my favorite movie of 2024. Guys, that is my ranking from let's go from 10 to 1 again really quickly. Moana 2 at 10, Transformers 1 at 9, Gladiator 2 at 8, Deadpool and Wolverine at 7, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes at 6, Conclave at 5, The Wild Robot at 4, Dune Part 2 at 3, Wicked Part 1 at 2, and Inside Out 2 at number 1. That is my list, guys. And I'd love to hear yours. Honestly, that's the most important part here. I'd love to hear your top 10 films, or even more. Just give as many, as you want in this list. 15, 20, however movies you saw, totally fine. I'd love to hear that in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for a great 2024. Let's look ahead now to 2025. But first, let me know what your top 10 movies of 2024 were in the comments down below. All right, guys, as part of the 2024 wrap-up and 2025 look ahead in movies and TV, we have another segment here, and it is going to be my predictions for the top 10 films in terms of worldwide box office for 2025. I'm going to be giving you my top 10 predictions and some ballpark numbers. I haven't given, I'm not going to go to the dollar or the cent. I'm not going to say, X movie is going to make $725 million and 360 cents. I don't know. Just making up numbers. But I'm not going to go that granular. I generally went in increments of $25 million. So 100 million, 150 million, 175 million, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how I was structuring this list. And basically what I did was I went on a website and I looked at every single film that was coming out in 2025, at least according to this website's release calendar. And I wrote down every single movie that I thought had a chance to make over $100 million, wrote down the rough estimate, again, in terms of the ballpark of, within the $25 million range. And then I also, then I took that and basically was able to extrapolate a top 10 list out of that. So we are going to go through, I'm going to go through, because I came up with 35 films, which seems like a lot, doesn't it? I don't know. Maybe it's not. I haven't looked into how many movies in 2023 or 2024 have made $100 million at least, but 35 seems like a lot. And maybe I'm just way overestimating some of these films. I'm sure some of these films are not going to make $100 million. I'm sure some films that I haven't listed here will make $100 million. But these are the films that I think will be up there. And so I'm going to run through 35 through 11 really quickly. We're not going to spend too much time. Even the pictures, I'm not going to put pictures up for every single one, but just going to run through them really quickly so that it's on YouTube. And when these films do come out, maybe, I was wrong, I was right. But so you guys know my predictions are, in writing, quote unquote, and you can judge it based off of that. So let's start there. And just in terms of rationale, I might give rationale, really quickly for some of these films. But honestly, for the most part, I was just thinking, is it based off of an IP? Is it a sequel? And then just sort of extrapolating, okay, was the previous sequel well received? Is this the second film? Because if it's a second film, generally means the previous film was well received enough that it will get a little bit of a bump from the worldwide, gross of the first film, et cetera, all these different things. So we'll talk through those as well. I'll give like a 2-sentence blurb for each one of them as we go along. So starting in at number 35, in the $100 million range, I have Until Dawn, based off a video game, has potential to make some money. Number 34, Mortal Kombat. I'm not even going to read these numbers, actually. I'm just going to go through them from the bottom up. So Mortal Kombat 2, I think, is going to make $100 million based off of an original IP, or an IP. It's its sequel, so we'll see about that. Saw 11, $125 million range. I don't know. Do these movies still make money? The previous one still made over $100 million, so we'll see. Love Hurts, the film starring Ke Huy Quan, coming out on February 7th. I think $150 million. I don't know, honestly. Maybe nobody's going to see this film. Maybe everyone's going to see this film. It looks so cheesy and so corny that I honestly have no idea. Nobody 2 is, the Bob Odenkirk movie. The first movie was kind of a sleeper, not a hit, but critically it was well received, and so they're making a sequel, and I think it can make some money, $175 million. The SpongeBob movie, Search for SquarePants, $175 million. I don't know. Kids will probably see this. SpongeBob fans will probably see this. I think even people who are fans of the SpongeBob franchise don't necessarily go out to see these movies all the time, but we'll see. We'll see about that. Predator Badlands, $200 million. I think, based on the really well-received Prey, critically well-received Prey, because that movie came out on, I want to say Hulu, and so, it didn't have a chance at the box office, but it was really well received, and so I have hope that they're going to make another Predator movie that will make some money as well. The Accountant 2, $250 million. The first one, I believe, made about 190, somewhere in that range, $150 to $200 million, and so, this is the Ben Affleck directed, and I think starring film, and so I think that this one can improve upon that because it was so well received. Megan 2.0, $250 million. I think, why not? The first one was kind of a cultural hit and it didn't make too much money, but I think that the second one can make some more money. The Conjuring Last Rites, $250 million. It's the Conjuring franchise. It'll make some money. The Black Phone 2, $250 million. I think the first one made about between $150 to $200 million as well. And I think that because of that, Scott Derrickson was directing it. I believe he's directing the second one as well. And I think that this one can make some money in that range as well. The Bad Guys 2, $275 million. I don't know. The trailers for this look kind of terrible, but it's a kid's movie. It's coming out in August. I don't think anyone else is really releasing a bunch of stuff in August. So yeah, there's that. Paddington in Peru, $300 million. The first two films, I think, made under $300 million. Or I think the first one made about 300 and the second one made 250-ish. So I think the same crowd of people who like the first two films would be showing up to this one. I don't expect that this one's going to attract many new people, to be quite honest with you. Number 22, Now You See Me 3, $325 million. I think that, it's a solid franchise. The franchise makes some money, and I think that this one, as long as it's good, because I think that's the big caveat I have to make here in terms of these movies, is that if these movies are bad, then these predictions go out the window. They might not make any money. If these movies are really good, because I'm just sort of operating under the base assumption that these movies are about the same as their predecessors or movies that are similar to them in their genres. And so, if they're really good or really bad, it can skew it. And I think that Now You See Me 3 is one of those examples. If it's just sort of good in that vein of the first two films, I think it'll make some money for sure. Karate Kid's Legends, $350 million. It's coming out in late May. And yeah, I don't know. It's a kind of an interesting concept of, combining the Ralph Macchio and the Jackie Chan Karate Kid franchises. And so we'll see where we go from there. Five Nights at Freddy's 2, $350 million. The first one, I didn't think it was a very good movie, but it made a lot of money. That franchise has a huge fan base. I used to be a big fan of the lore as well. And I think that they're learning probably from their mistakes. And I'm hoping that this movie is going to be a little bit better. Just a few more, guys. We are almost to the top 10. Tron Ares, $350 million. I think that, the nostalgia for this franchise is kind of worn off, especially with the new generations. But I think that if the film can look cool, it can have that nice retro neon aesthetic, I think it'll be appealing to sci-fi fans as well. From the world of John Wick, Ballerina, I have coming in at about $350 million. I think the John Wick films have been steadily going up, and the last John Wick film I think John Wick 4 made about $400 million. And so because this is a spin-off, but because also John Wick is appearing and Ana de Armas looks great in the movie and, it has that John Wick feel, I think it'll make in the ballpark of $350 million. A Minecraft movie, $400 million. I think even if this movie is terrible, it still has enough kids who will want to go and see it that $400 million feels somewhat realistic. If it's good, this movie could make $600, $700, $800 million. But if it's as bad as I think it is, $400 million. Number 16 is an odd one. You might say it's an odd one, but The Passion of the Christ Resurrection Part 1. Guys, the first Passion of the Christ made almost $600 million. Now, I think there are some mitigating factors going on here. Number one being, who asked for a sequel to The Passion of the Christ? But Mel Gibson apparently is going to make this, and apparently it's a part 1 of the sequel, so I don't know, kind of weird. But I think lest we forget, the first movie was one of the highest grossing R-rated films of all time. I could see this movie going in any direction. I could see it making even more money, but I could also see it making substantially less, and so I don't know. I put it here because I just think it's a bad bet to bet against a movie that was so historic in terms of box office. The first film making, again, almost $600 million, I believe. And I think it's just a bad bet to say, oh, but nobody cares, so this movie's going to make $50 million. I don't think that that's true. But I also am just hesitant to say that this movie is going to make a ton of money, in terms of like 800 million or whatever. I don't know. It's been a while since the first movie, so we'll see about that. Mickey 17, $425 million. I know Parasite itself didn't make too much money in the worldwide box office, but because it won every single Oscar, and because people seem to know, at least in the trailers, they're putting Bong Joon-ho's name in all the trailers, and Robert Pattinson's there. This is more in the Snowpiercer vein, I suppose, because it's not a Korean film. It's more of just an international film, and it looks really good. So I think I have high hopes, maybe higher hopes than most people for this movie in terms of box office, but I think it can make quite a bit of money. Disney's Snow White, $450 million. I don't know. Little Mermaid made about $550 to $600 million, and that movie was not incredibly well received, but it was liked. And other movies like Aladdin have made $1 billion, but Cinderella made something like $500 million. And I think that Snow White is one of the Disney princesses that people have not been clamoring for a remake, and I don't think the trailers look particularly good. I think Rachel Zegler is, she can sing like nobody else, but I'm a little hesitant to put this one much higher than that. Elio, $450 million. If this movie is good, I can see it falling into the Elemental range, which made about $500 million. So we'll see. I think because it's an unknown IP, it's not an Inside Out 2, for example, that I think it'll probably fall under $500 million, but I think it can be pretty solid. Lilo and Stitch, $500 million. I suspect this movie's going to be big. I think $500 million might even be conservative, honestly, but we'll see about that. And the final film to not make the top 10 is How to Train Your Dragon, the live action film, and I have it coming in at $550 million. The first 3 films, the animated films, actually did not make a ton of money. Just relatively speaking, they didn't make above $500 million, I believe, but this movie I think is coming off the nostalgia of those films, and I think it looks really good, and so I have it coming in at $550 million. Okay, I know that was a lot, but I wanted to put that out there just so you guys understand the process, and so I can have those films also on the record as well. But now we are finally starting the top 10. These are the top 10 films, I believe, in terms of worldwide international gross. I really hope I didn't forget a movie because that would be very embarrassing, but I have these top 10 films in terms of worldwide grossing, international gross in 2025. And I'm going to give a little bit more of an in-depth explanation as we start out here. So coming in at number 10, we have Superman, and I have it at $600 million, coming out on July 11th, 2025. This movie is interesting to me, though, because I think this movie has one of the highest variances of any of the films on this list, honestly. I think it's very possible that this film could make something like $350 to $400 million because of the bad taste that the DCEU, has left in the mouths of people. I mean, if you look at 2023, right, the 4 DCEU films that came out, Shazam 2, The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, they didn't make any money. And I know that none of those films are Superman, but even Man of Steel didn't make. It made something like $500 to $600 million, which was really solid, and it was a solid, movie in terms of reception. But it didn't make $1 billion immediately, and even the Batman, which was a great movie, didn't make $1 billion. So these aren't guaranteed $1 billion films, right? And I think the DCEU, the sting of that, I don't think has completely washed out. But I think if Superman is good, then you start making Superman 2s, and you start making Brave and the Bold and whatnot, and I think you have yourself a formula for success here. But I'm going to put it, I don't know if I want to say conservatively, but I'm just going to put it here at $600 million because I think there's really a range of plus or minus $200 million in here. So we'll see where we go from here. But number 10 is Superman. Number 9 is Captain America Brave New World, coming out on February 14th, 2025, and I have it coming in at $650 million. I think that, there's been a lot of speculation around this film in terms of reshoots and troubled production and whatnot. I just can't get around the fact, though, that the trailers have been presenting a film that looks really solid, and this film could end up being a disaster if the reports are true. I'm hoping it's not. I'm hoping it's really good. And again, I mean, the reports around Rogue One were that it was a disastrous production, and it was just a great movie. And so I have hope for Captain America Brave New World. They've been tinkering, and it just, I don't know. I don't take the reports of bad test screenings too seriously because, I mean, who would know? They sign NDAs, right? How would you know? So I'm hoping that this is going to be a solid film. Even at the height, though, even if this film comes out and it's something like a 90% Rotten Tomatoes, I still don't think it has the ceiling of, other Captain America films, right? I think even Captain America Winter Soldier made somewhere in the range of, I'm forgetting now, maybe, was it like $600 million? Maybe? I can look it up later. But, I think that because people are not accustomed to Sam Wilson as Captain America as well, rightly or wrongly, that's a topic of conversation for another day. But I think that's a factor as well. And I think that this film probably has a ceiling around the $750 million range. And that's if it's really good and it's really well received. But I think I can feel pretty good just, even the poorly received MCU films like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And I'm talking about films that have recognizable characters, right? But Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, makes almost $500 million, right? And I think that was a poorly received film. The Marvels, I think, had other problems going for it that kind of tanked its box office. But again, I think that Marvel films, I think Captain America is a recognizable IP. And so $650 million feels somewhat reasonable to me. Coming in at number 8 is the next MCU film on this list, The Fantastic Four: First Steps. I have it coming in at $700 million. Now, the reason it's higher than Captain America Brave New World, because I think that the ceiling for Fantastic Four: First Steps is about the same as Captain America Brave New World, but I think the Fantastic Four: First Steps has a chance to reach that ceiling much more than Captain America Brave New World does. I think actually Captain America Brave New World ceiling is probably a little higher, maybe the $800 million range, because it's Captain America and people recognize, Sam Wilson and whatnot. Fantastic Four being new characters, new IP, or not new IP, but new characters in the MCU, and the fact that the previous films were really not well received in the previous iterations, I think actually, might even push the film down, the film ceiling down. But I think, again, Matt Shakman looks like he's crafting an incredible film. The cast is fantastic. Vanessa Kirby, Pedro Pascal, Evan Moss-Baccarat, and Joseph Quinn, look great. Ralph Ineson and Julia Garner, I believe, playing Galactus and Silver Surfer. Robert Downey Jr. might show up. So I think this film has the potential to be one of the best MCU films. And because of that, I think it can really hit that ceiling. But fingers crossed. And coming at number 7 is the third MCU film. I think that all 3 MCU films are actually going to top out around the same. I have Thunderbolts coming in at about $725 million. I think that Thunderbolts might have the biggest crowd appeal. I still suspect that, Fantastic Four: First Steps is going to be a better movie in terms of critical reception and even my own reception, but I think Thunderbolts is going to have the biggest appeal. So that Thunderbolts doesn't need to be, this 95% critically, certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes kind of film. It can be in the 80% kind of range, but if it's good and it has that sort of, this is a fun summer movie, I think that this film is the one that can take off because people love Florence Pugh. David Harbour is great, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, right? All these other characters that you might want to get to know as well. Kicking off the summer, it has the prime real estate in terms of summer, by the way. It is that slot that usually goes to Avengers films. And so it went to Guardians of the Galaxy last time. And I think that that's important because it shows that there's confidence in this movie. And so I have this movie actually making the most money out of the 3 MCU films. But again, not by much. I could totally see any of these 3 films flipping orders and whatnot. So we'll see about that. So those are, that's number 7. And those are the 3 MCU films coming out in 2025. Coming in at number 6 is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, coming out in May 23rd, 2025. And I think it'll make $750 million. Now, the last Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, or now Dead Reckoning, came out in 2023. And it did very well critically. In fact, it was one of my favorite theater experiences I've had in a long time. It was awesome, but it didn't make a lot of money, surprisingly. I think this is all relative, but relatively speaking, it didn't make a whole lot of money. It was somewhere under the $600 million range. But what's interesting about that is that the previous two films, Mission Impossible Fallout and Rogue Nation, made somewhere in the range of $600 to $800 million. Like, they were much higher, in fact, in the $700 million range. And because this is the final one, maybe it was the part one in the title, who knows? Who knows? All sorts of factors. But these movies are great. They do well. And I think that because this is the final one, I can see it topping out at the higher end of these Mission Impossible films. I have it coming in at $750 million, in that range, by the way. Because like I said, I want to reiterate, I'm not saying it's going to make exactly $750 million. I'm just saying within the $25 million range-ish, I think it's going to come in at $750 million. Coming in at number 5 is Michael. And for those of you who don't know Michael, it's the Michael Jackson biopic. And I think everyone who's listening to this video, listening to this podcast, has a reaction when they hear the name Michael Jackson. A lot of positive emotions for sure because of the music and the cultural phenomenon, but also a lot of negative emotions as well. From all accounts, this film looks incredible. The actor is his nephew, and from all accounts, again, it looks like he is incredible in this movie. And here's the interesting thing about these musical biopics as well. Some of them do incredibly well box office wise. In fact, Bohemian Rhapsody almost made $1 billion. It made $910 million. Other films like Elvis and Rocketman don't do that well and make somewhere in the range of $100 to $200 million. I was thinking about those movies as I was putting this list together. And I think that Michael, the Michael Jackson biopic falls in the range more of the Bohemian Rhapsody. Michael Jackson, because you think about, Bohemian Rhapsody, Queen, right? Queen is just such a big, part of the zeitgeist of just Western society. And I think that Michael Jackson is even more so. On top of the fact you add, people who are probably curious to see how they handle the personal allegations behind a lot of the things that Michael Jackson did in his personal life. And I think that this movie could make a lot of money, especially if it's one of those Oscar contender films as well. Now, some people are even saying it can make $1 billion. I don't personally see that, honestly. If Bohemian Rhapsody couldn't make $1 billion, I don't know if this one can, honestly, because musical biopics just seem to have a ceiling as well. But I do think $800 million feels very solid for me, and I think that this movie could be huge. This movie could be huge. So Michael is coming in at number 5. The next 4 films, and if you want to play along, you can go on the release calendar and see what 4 movies you think are left, because these 4 movies, I'm going to tell you right now, I think are all going to make $1 billion. So I have 4 films in 2025 making upwards of $1 billion. Coming in at number 4 is Jurassic World Rebirth, coming in at $1.125 billion, coming out in July of 2025. The Jurassic World films are somehow, I'm not going to say immune. They're not immune to the critical reception, but it's pretty darn close, because Jurassic World Dominion was panned. People didn't like it. Fallen Kingdom was pretty much panned, and people didn't like it. I didn't like those 2 films at all. I watched them, and so did everyone else, because Jurassic World Dominion, which I think is probably one of the worst Jurassic, films that I've seen in a while, made $1 billion. So you have that, right? People just want to see Jurassic World. We had a little bit of a break. I think Jurassic World Dominion came out in 2021, I want to say. So a little bit of a break here, maybe 4 or 5 years. But on top of that, this movie looks much better than the previous Jurassic World films. Like the cast of Mahershala Ali and Scarlett Johansson, that's really interesting as well. Like 2 of the best actors working in Hollywood today, I think is a good sign, at least. And so I just can't imagine that this film isn't going to make under $1 billion. I think that even if it's bad, it's different, right? It's not the Chris Pratt, because I think if they made another Jurassic World film that was also bad with Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard, people would be like, kind of over it. And I think that movie would still have made $850 million. But I think you're going to see Jurassic World trailers come out. People are going to be like, oh, it's a different cast and dinosaurs, and it looks good. And I think people are just going to go out and see it. It's also coming out in prime time. It's coming out beginning of July 2025, and I think it's going to make so much money. So Jurassic World Rebirth coming in at number 4. Coming in at number 3 is Zootopia 2, coming in at $1.25 billion, and it's coming out Thanksgiving of 2025. The first Zootopia film made $1 billion. The second movie, it's going to make $1 billion. The question is how big, and honestly, I don't know, but I'm going to put it up here because I think that the 2 films above it are just safely, I think much more safely going to make way more money than Zootopia, but I think Zootopia 2 is just going to make a lot of money, and I think that we should be ready for that. So, Zootopia 2. Coming in at number 2, Wicked Part 2. I might be crazy here because as I'm recording this well in advance because I will be gone as these videos come out. I'll be away for a little bit, and so I wanted to record these ahead of time. So, I don't have final numbers for Wicked Part 1, unfortunately, but even if Wicked Part 1 doesn't make $1 billion, it is being so well received, and I think it's going to win a lot of Oscars. I think Cynthia Erivo might even win an Oscar. Who knows? Who knows? But it'll win set designs, costume design Oscars and whatnot. And it'll probably be nominated for Best Picture as well. And I think that no matter what, that is a recipe for success for the second part. I am so looking forward to the second part. I think it's one of my most anticipated films of 2025. And I have it coming in at $1.5 billion with a B, billion dollars. And it's coming out around Thanksgiving of 2025. But the number one film, and if you looked at the release calendar, it should be no surprise to you, is Avatar: Fire and Ash, coming in at $2.05 billion. I think, here's the thing with the Avatar franchise. Until proven otherwise, I'm going to put it at the $2 billion mark. But I also have been noticing that, obviously, with these two films, the first and the second one, there's a decline, right? I mean, the first film made almost $3 billion. Crazy. The second film made something like $2.3 billion. I think that this third film is going to make just over $2 billion, but you start talking about the fourth film. Even if this third film is well received, I think you're going to start to get, a little less diminishing returns every single time coming out here. And I wonder what that's going to do, for the sequels coming out. We'll see. But, maybe the third film is so well received that the fourth film makes like $3 billion and it just crushes every record. But until proven otherwise, I'm going to put Avatar: Fire and Ash at the top of this list. So guys, those are my top 10 box office predictions for 2025, the top 10 grossing films of the year. We'll see. This video is going to be up all year, obviously, and I'm probably going to get a lot of these wrong because I also have, the other 11 through 35 up here as well. So I have 35 chances to be very wrong here. I'm hoping to be in the ballpark of maybe within $50 million of all of these, but, I'm probably going to be I might even get 5. And if I get 5 within a very close range, I'd be pretty happy about that. So let me know in the comments, what do you think will be the top 10 grossing box office films of 2025? Let me know in the comments, and I'd love to hear your rationale as well. So let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below. All right, guys, and to round out this end-of-year Access Blockbusters pod episode, looking back at 2024 and looking ahead to 2025, we have my final ranking here, the top 10 most anticipated films of 2025. We just talked about the box office, and, there was a lot more quote-unquote objective thought going into that, right? Looking at numbers and looking at trends and whatnot. This list is entirely subjective. This list will not look anything like a lot of yours. I mean, it'll probably have some decent overlap, but I'm not expecting anybody to have the exact same list as me, and that's okay because, like I've been saying for many, many years on this channel, it's all about what you think and what you're excited for, just who you are as a person, what you're interested in, what movies you like, and I think that that's awesome. So I think, no matter what happens here, this is going to be a different list for just about everyone. I think that is exciting for all of us. So this is going to be a very, very personal list, and we're just going to go down. I have some honorable mentions here in no particular order, and then we'll talk about the top 10 movies on this list. So I have here 6 honorable mentions. I think I'll just go in alphabetical order. We have Five Nights at Freddy's 2. I might be crazy for this because I watched the first film. I did watch the first film, and I did not like it. But Here's the thing. I'm a big fan of the lore, and I was one of those people who watched all the game theory videos, and I watched Let's Plays of the games, and I was a really big fan of the lore. I know it's gotten a little bit crazy lately with all the AI stuff, and I don't even know what's going on anymore. I don't really follow it too closely, but I have to say, there is still so much promise with a movie based on these characters. One of the things, though, that I didn't like about the first film is that it just wasn't scary. I mean, I'm not somebody who likes scary things at all, but they look the animatronics, and I'm so impressed, by the way, how the Jim Henson Company made them, actually puppets and animatronics, but they just weren't scary. They were moving so slowly, and they didn't look frightening at all in terms of the aesthetic. The games, they were very scary. So I think I have reason to hope that they have learned from their mistakes and are going to, make a better movie for Five Nights at Freddy's 2, but honestly, I don't know. Another honorable mention here is Jurassic World Rebirth. I did not like Dominion. I did not like Fallen Kingdom. I liked the first Jurassic World movie, and I obviously love Jurassic Park. But I think that there is reason to be hopeful here, just because of the new characters and the new actors in here and the new direction. We have Scarlett Johansson and Mahershala Ali, so I think that is exciting. And I think that there's potential always with the Jurassic World movie, and so yeah, it's a new direction for the franchise, and I'm interested. I'm definitely interested. Paddington in Peru. I think is also a film that you got to be excited about, because the first two films are some of the greatest movies ever made. So I think that is definitely up there as well. And then we have Tron. Oh no, excuse me, not well Tron. I just spoiled it, so I'll go a little bit out of order. But Tron Ares, I think the Tron franchise has a lot of potential. I did like Tron Legacy when it came out, though it came out when I was much younger. But I think that just the aesthetic, the neon retro vibes, I think are pretty strong. So I'd be interested to see what Jared Leto, who is very hit or miss, but we'll see how he does in another big blockbuster film. And then I went a little bit out of order. I didn't catch the other one, but Snow White. I'm putting Snow White here pretty much just because of Rachel Zegler, because I think that, her abilities in musicals and just her singing ability is unparalleled. Honestly, it's so incredible. And so I'd be interested in this film, but the trailers have not made me super excited. So this is kind of an on the fence honorable mention. And the final one is Zootopia 2, because Zootopia 2, Zootopia was just a phenomenon, and Zootopia 2 is coming out next year. So those are some honorable mentions. Now we're going to go through the top 10 films, the top 10 most anticipated films of 2025, starting from number 10 going up to number 1. Coming in at number 10 is Elio. I think Elio, the latest Pixar film, has potential. I'm not going to say I'm super, super psyched about this movie. I think that the trailers have been cute, but not much more. But knowing Pixar, I think that it's just such a bad idea to bet against them at this point. I think that they have so much potential, even in their quote unquote not as good films, like Lightyear, for example. Lightyear was okay. Still, they're okay, and they're not bad. I think that if that's the ceiling, or excuse me, if that's the floor, then there's a lot of potential here. And if the ceiling is something like an Inside Out or Inside Out 2, I'm on board. I'm excited. So we'll see. But I have some hopes for Elio. Coming in at number 9 is Captain America: Brave New World. There is some hesitation here as well, just because of all the reported leaks and rumors that this film had a terrible production and it got scrapped and reshot and all these different things. But the trailers just look so good. And so I'm trying to balance those two things together, because the trailers are promising probably one of the better MCU films in a long time. And yet people are saying this movie had a terrible production and nobody liked it, and whatever. I don't know what to trust and who to trust, but I just have to hope that this movie is going to be good, because I think the potential there is so high. So Captain America: Brave New World, number 9. Number 8 is How to Train Your Dragon, the live action movie. The first How to Train Your Dragon film, the animated film, has such a special place in my heart. It is one of those films that I think one of those animated films, that can rival something like a Pixar movie. It's so heartfelt, it's so warm, it's so genuine, and it has such great character work, such great emotion in it. And obviously Toothless is fantastic. And the first trailer for this film, I know it's just a shot-for-shot remake. I know I should be more against this. I should be more cynical about it. And I kind of am, because I'm like, what's the point of this? You're also remaking Moana. And that looks like kind of a shot-for-shot remake as well. Why? Why are we doing this? What's the point? But then I see the trailer and it just kindles that same emotion from me as the first movie did. And I can't help but be excited. I don't know. Call me irrational, call me dumb, call me crazy. But How to Train Your Dragon is coming in at number 8. Coming in at number 7 is Avatar: Fire and Ash. These films are really good. Now, the two Avatar films have never been, Avatar has never been my favorite franchise of all time, but it is hard. It is incredibly difficult to bet against James Cameron at this point. I went into Avatar: The Way of Water being like, how good could this movie possibly be? Then all the critics were like, you gotta see this movie, see it on the biggest screen possible, watch it in 3D if you have to, and nobody ever says to watch it in 3D. So made one exception. That was the only 3D movie I've seen probably since the pandemic, honestly. Haven't been watching 3D movies because just not good. Maybe a couple others, out of necessity because of timing, but Avatar: Fire and Ash was the only movie I intentionally went to see in 3D in a long, long time. Not Avatar: Fire and Ash, Avatar: The Way of Water. And it was incredible. It was unbelievable. The story itself was good, but the visuals and everything else, amazing. So super hard to bet against James Cameron. I'm not going to be, thinking about this movie weeks before it comes out, but when, the time comes and when the reviews come out and hopefully they're good, I'm going to be very excited again for Avatar 3. Coming in at number 6 is Superman. How could you not be excited for Superman? It looks like James Gunn has the makings of a film that is, very different from something that he's done before in the comic book blockbuster movie space, which I've been begging for a long time. I mean, again, you do really well in the Peacemaker, Creature Commando, Suicide Squad, Guardians of the Galaxy, ragtag group of rogue heroes vein. You do really well in that vein. But branching out to Superman, and on top of that, casting David Corenswet, who looks like he's great. He's going to be great in the role. It's going to be so exciting. I can't wait for Superman. This is going to be the real launch of the DC you, because if for those of you who have seen, the beginning of Creature Commandos, it's more connected to the DCEU than you might hope for and want. So, there is that. But this is going to be the launch. This is going to be the launch. And I am just so excited for that. And I mean, again, my only trepidation is that this is just going to veer too much into the James Gunn sphere, but we'll see. Because I think Superman still needs to have a universality about it, that other films like Guardians of the Galaxy or Creature Commandos don't need to have, but we'll see where he goes from there. Coming in at number 5 is the Fantastic Four First Steps. This is exciting for multiple reasons, because I think that this is Marvel's chance to finally get this franchise right. And I think that they are on the right track. Matt Shakman, who directed all of WandaVision, one of my single favorite things that Marvel has ever done, including the Infinity Saga. I'm including in all of it. WandaVision, loved it. And Matt Shakman knows how to make something different, right? He directed all the episodes with the weird sitcom vibes and all the different aesthetics in there, different eras of sitcoms. And I think that Fantastic Four First Steps being set in a retro 1960s futuristic setting in a different universe, I think is also really interesting. The cast, great. Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, Evan Moss-Bacharach, and Joseph Quinn. Who knows? We might see Doctor Doom, but Galactus and Silver Surfer are going to be there. It's so exciting. I have such high hopes for this film, and I hope that Marvel finally is able to get this franchise right, because they deserve it. They really do. Coming in at number 4, a film that, because the rest of them you might have been able to surmise based on what didn't make the honorable mentions. Number 4 is interesting. Mickey 17. Now, I'm going to make an admission here. I'm one of the people who don't like Parasite. And before everyone clicks off and yells at me in the comments, it's not for the reason you might think. I don't think Parasite is, I didn't come out of Parasite going, this is the worst made movie of all time. It's terrible writing, terrible acting, terrible No, none of that. Really, for me, what Parasite came down to was just how it made me feel. And I know that that's a little bit of a different and maybe more subjective way to look at a movie. And so it's not the usual like, I think the pacing wasn't as good. Not anything like that. I just came out of that movie feeling so disgusted with humanity, if that makes sense. And it's just not a film that I would care to rewatch because of just the way it made me feel. That being said, it's not anything about Bong Joon-ho's direction, right? He is such a talented director, and so I carry that part over to Mickey 17. And Mickey 17 doesn't really look like it's in that same vein of, Parasite in that way, although I'm sure it'll have very deep themes. It's, people being cloned and being expendable and working and labor and whatnot. I think that's really interesting. And Robert Pattinson looks great in the movie. The rest of the cast, I think Mark Ruffalo's in there as well. It looks really great. The concept looks interesting. The trailers look fantastic. I'm excited. I'm very excited for Mickey 17. And this is, again, coming from somebody who was not super, not a huge fan of Parasite. So I hope that that's a ringing endorsement of this film. Coming in at number 3 is Thunderbolts, asterisk. I don't know. I don't know what to do with that thing. We'll see. I have a theory, and maybe I'll make an entirely separate, video about this, where I think it means Dark Avengers, but we'll see. Thunderbolts, though. The trailers have done nothing but excite me. The cast is amazing. I think that this has the potential to be one of those kind of Phase 3-like MCU films that has the broad appeal, but also the emotion and the heart and the interesting concept. Who knows what's going on with Sentry, with Val, and all the different characters with Bucky and why he's in Congress, but then he's coming in and coming after the Thunderbolts. It's so interesting, and the cast looks great. This looks like the ensemble film that we had all been hoping for a long time, because we really haven't gotten an ensemble film in quite a while, and I am just so excited about Thunderbolts. So, number 3, Thunderbolts. Number 2, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. The last Mission Impossible film, I've talked about this before, I talked about it in the previous segment. The last Mission Impossible film, Dead Reckoning, or, used to be Dead Reckoning Part 1, is one of the best theater experiences I have ever had. I'm not even kidding. I sat in the theater, and when that movie ended, when the credits rolled, I was so immersed in the movie that I almost sagged in relief when the film ended, because I was so tense the entire time. These movies continue to amaze me. And yeah, maybe it's about time that they end, because Tom Cruise is not getting any younger, even though he still looks great for his age. But it's just, this franchise has delivered and delivered and delivered and delivered. The last 5 films, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then now this is going to be the 5th film. I mean, they've all been incredible. And so I am really hoping they stick the landing, and I'm excited. I'm very excited about Mission Impossible. Coming in at number 1, though, is this any surprise to anybody based on what you've seen from my channel? It is Wicked Part 2. Wicked Part 2 probably would have been in the honorable mention category, maybe even number 10-ish range if I had posted this before I saw Wicked Part 1. But after seeing Wicked Part 1, could there be any other answer, Can there be any other answer to kind of evoke a Chandler Bing-ism? But Wicked Part 2 is just, I'm so excited to see where they go from here. If they can replicate even 75% of the magic from the first film, it's going to be a great movie. I know they don't have the signature Defying Gravity song, although I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen the Broadway musical. I'm not super familiar with it, and I don't want to be in the next year because I just want to go in and have the same kind of experience I had with Wicked Part 1 of barely knowing anything beside the premise. And so I'm just so excited for Wicked Part 2, and I can't wait to see what John Chu does with this next installment. So guys, that is it. Those are my top 10 most anticipated films of 2025. I'm sure at the end of the year, as we do our retrospective for 2025 in a year, crazy, that I'm sure some films will be on this list that I hadn't even thought of or heard of or had no idea or may not even have even been on the release calendar at all. And so that's just the beauty of this. But I hope that all 16 films that I talked about here, the honorable mentions and the top 10, are great movies. Because if they are, then it's just going to be bonus every time a movie is good that's not on this list. So I hope that these movies are awesome. And I'd love to hear your guys' list in the comments down below. Let me know. What are your films? You can do a top 10. You can just do a general ranking or a general list. But let me know what your most anticipated films of 2025 are in the comments down below. I'd love to hear them from you guys. All right, guys, and that will do it for our last episode. I believe this is coming out at the end of 2024. I think so, based on the schedule. But, last episode of 2024 or first episode of 2025. But anyways, this is going to, like I said, this is our wrap up for 24 and look ahead to 25. Thank you so much, guys. I genuinely mean this for 2024. It has been a crazy year. We have, it's been a transition for me in terms of life, just life milestones and things like that. And, being able to finally be able to get a consistent schedule going for recording and uploading and things like that has allowed me to post a video or a clip or a segment or a podcast episode every single day, save for one day, basically starting mid-August all the way through the end of the year. And that's not stopping anytime soon, by the way, guys. I really mean that. It's been such a joy to be able to have that. But yeah, I mean, it's been incredible. It's been so incredible. And I've been so appreciative of all the new subscribers and new people who have joined the Access Blockbusters crew. It's been so amazing. So guys, thank you so much for 2024. Let's look ahead to a wonderful 2025. And I hope you guys have a wonderful, or have had rather, a wonderful holiday season, Christmas season. Christmas is my favorite time of the year. And I had a wonderful New Year's. And let's look forward to all the great things that are about to come ahead. So wishing you guys all the best, good health and family and friends time and whatever makes you happy during this time. Hope that all is going well, guys. Thank you so much again for listening. And I will see you guys in the next one.